start off with Sister Ieasha Prime. I know these women don't really like bios, so they don't want me to go in and how incredible in their traditional bio, but I just want to talk about how Sister Ieasha Prime is now the Sister and Youth Coordinator at Al-Hijrah, mashallah. I met her through this capacity as a Rising Soul mentor. I was coming to hear more about the program, and I will tell you, she has inspired me just knowing what a fighter she is for all of us, that she's here doing the work day in and day out to inspire our youth, to give back to the community and to train our youth in becoming adults that care about social justice, have the tools to go out there and do social activism, and be successful in their career. So without further ado, Sister Ieasha.
Thank you. Assalamu alaikum. First and foremost, I want to thank Islamic Relief as well as Al-Hijrah for hosting this program. I can't tell you enough that how much this moment in and of itself is great change, right? Just to see 4 women inside the masjid giving a talk to the masses about telling their stories of struggle and sacrifice and what purposes they serve in order to move this community forward, that in and of itself is a testimony of the power of purpose. So Jazakumullah khair, I'm honored to be a part of it. I'm honored to be a part of the Al-Hijrah team. I'm honored to be on the stage with these great women, especially with each one of them having such a unique story as it relates to their particular method of activism. So the title of today's talk is called The Power of Purpose, our stories, the stories that we share as it relates to our involvement in work, in that activism and social justice. So my story is a little bit different from Sister Isra, as all of ours is different, in the fact that I grew up, I'm African American, grew up from Jacksonville, Florida, Duval County, and I remember when I was at her age, I had never even heard of a Muslim. I didn't even know what a Muslim, Islam, Muhammad alayhi salatu wasalam, did not know what that was. And so I came to DC actually as an artist. Long story short, I had been trained as a child basically in theater and dance and things like that. And so my mom was like, there's this great school, Duke Ellington School of Arts. I really want you to go to this school. So it was in DC that I was introduced to myself. And when I say myself, in the fact that the level of diversity and the level of, at that time, there was a real strong Black Power movement that was going on. And I'm not talking about the 60s, I'm not that old. I'm talking about the 90s, okay? And so when we talk, just want to tell really briefly a little bit about my history before that. When we talk about activism and social justice, it's in my DNA, right? I can remember my father was involved in the civil rights movement, and long story short, he would always sit me down and show me, go through photo books of pictures. This is what your grandmother did, and she started the first NAACP in Jacksonville, Florida, and she was the first to establish an African American Boys and Girls Club, and she did this and that and that. And long story short, that just him constantly reminding me of that. I had a mother who was completely apolitical, right? She was like, I don't want to hear it. Don't tell me no stories about that, because she was not, her thing was, I'm interested in how we're going to move forward, right? And so her method and her contribution was she used to tutor in government housing, right? And so she would come home and always tell us this story, particularly about this boy named Anthony, and this is important. So long story short, Anthony was this young boy that she tutored, and he was extremely poor. And so every day she would tell us about how Anthony was doing in his tutoring and how he was progressing. And so she would always tell us when we would get our allowance, what are you going to do for Anthony this week? Right? And she would constantly kind of remind us when it was, at that time, I grew up Christian. So when Christmas time came, she said, what are we going to buy for Anthony? Right? What are we doing for Anthony? And so it was just in the back of my mind that in my privilege, living in suburbia in Bay Meadows in Jacksonville, Florida, that my mom was constantly giving me this reminder that I had a responsibility to those who were less fortunate, whether or not I ever saw them. In addition to my parents being very committed to service in the church, they took us on a regular basis. We used to visit nursing homes and hospitals. And we would go to these nursing homes, and I can remember the faces where my parents would tell me, go sit with them and just be with them. I said, Mom, what do I do? What I said? She said, just go be with them, and whatever they need, whatever they ask you for, you do it. And so I actually would begin looking forward to going to the nursing home and serving these elderly who didn't have family. And so through that, my father reminding me of my history and my mother reminding me of what my role was in the present, I kind of grew up with that as service and commitment as a part of my DNA, as a part of my story. So when I get to DC, and now I'm introduced to Malcolm X, right? I get my hands on the autobiography of Malcolm X, and I'm in, at that time, DC was Chocolate City. You don't know it from, it's gentrification, but at that time, that was extremely important when you grow up being a minority in Jacksonville, Florida, and then you're surrounded by other people who look like you. There's a serious empowerment in that, right? And then people reminding me of my history. So through Duke Ellington, I became a youth ambassador. And I traveled to Morocco and Senegal, as Allah would have it. And so through Morocco and Senegal is how I became Muslim. And maybe at another time, I'll talk about that. So once I became Muslim, then it was, I come back, and I already have this nagging in my heart for the plight of women and youth. Just for whatever reason, it's just this nagging in my heart. So I become Muslim. I get married. I'm pregnant. As many women have this moment when they are pregnant where it's like, oh my God, I'm about to be a mother. I've got to do something, right? I'm about to bring a child into this world, and I've got to do something to build a community for this child. So my nesting was a little bit bigger. And so I started an organization called Sisterhood in Action. And I give shout out to my mentors at the time. I was at Howard University, 19 years old, and my mentors were the likes of Imam Jahari, Imam Muhammad Majid, Imam Yahya Hindi, who's now the chaplain at Georgetown University. And so I started Sisterhood in Action, and my goal was I felt that Muslim women were not as educated as they needed to be, and particularly about their deen. And no one was really fighting for them. So at that time, I was working for the American Muslim Council. Now CARE is new on the scene. So I'm connecting with CARE, and we're fighting for the right for Muslim women to wear hijab and go to work. And so I'm saying, but where are the Muslim women who are educated about how to do this work? So I started Sisterhood in Action and began to hold education forums and sessions for Muslim women to be able not only to tell their narrative, but also for them to get the skills and the tools to be able to empower themselves and other women. Fast forward, and that's in my professional life, I have taken theater as a means to work with children in government housing. And so this is where, to me, was the biggest change. So long story short, I've got an assignment where my job is to design youth programs, after school programs in government housing in DC. See how things come full circle? How the seed your mama plants become trees. So I say that to you mothers and fathers. So now I'm doing program development in housing in DC, and we're doing a rites of passage program, empowering girls and giving them life skills and giving them the tools that they need in order to be great women. So we have a big block party coming up, and this block party is we close off the block in DC, and this is Nan and Horo Bellows, Northeast DC, and we're preparing these girls to present to their entire community. So I've got a student missing, and her name is Beverly. And so for about 2 weeks, I'm asking the girls, where's Beverly? Where's Beverly? Anybody seen Beverly? Anybody heard from Beverly? Somebody go to Beverly's door and knock on her, find out where's Beverly. She's this beautiful, beautiful 11-year-old girl who's a part of my after-school program. 2 weeks later, Beverly shows up to the aftercare program. And so at first in the program, they're sitting at a table and they're doing their homework and we give them a snack. And so I see Beverly and I just smile at her, and as I walk past her, I just want to touch her to let her know I missed her. So when I go to touch her, she starts hitting me and she starts spitting and she runs under the table and she urinates on herself. And so I tell everybody, okay, escort all of the other children out of the room, and I let it known I have to deal with Beverly. I need to find out what's going on. So I go under the table and I start talking to Beverly as she's sitting there shaking. And I'm trying to figure out what's wrong. Like, what happened? What's wrong? So by the end of 2 hours of dealing with Beverly, what I discover is that she's been missing because her mother sold her to the local drug dealer in order to pay off her drug habit. By the time I got finished dealing with social service and the police and them beginning to tell me, well, if we put her in the foster care system, she's probably going to experience that every day. And if we turn her mother over to the police, then who's going to take care of her? And we're going to continue this cycle. So what did we do? I went home and I wept for hours. And I said to myself, I don't have the spiritual understanding. For all that I've been taught and trained, I don't have the spiritual training to know, where do I put this? What do I do with this? I could find all the professional and all the whatever, but where do I put this in my soul? What do I do about this? How do I help Beverly's soul? So long story short, I said, I need a deeper understanding of my deen. I need to know, where is Allah in the struggle? I need to know, where is Allah in the story of Beverly? So I made it a mission. I need to know this deen. I need to know this book of Allah. I need to understand qadr. I need to understand how this activism, where is it in here, inside? Not externally. Where is it on the inside? So I began to spend the next 7 years studying my deen between Egypt and Yemen. And there are a whole bunch of stories in between Egypt and Yemen and struggles, and we don't have time for that. But long story short, when I came back, I said, I want to now combine my Islamic education with my street education, my stories of Beverly, with the other education that I had as it relates to empowering women and youth. So I started working in Islamic schools. And I kind of thought, that will be an easier flow for me. But inside Islamic schools and inside of Islamic institutions, I found many more Beverlys. Except now they were Khadija and Latifa and Jamila and Hasana and so forth, and Aliyah. But alhamdulillah, my commitment is that to bring what the secular education and the empowerment of women within the context of this deen, so that we can begin to empower and educate and mold and shape and heal the whole self of our women and girls. Jazakumullah khairan. So as it relates to social media, I just have a couple of points that I want to make. Number one, she's right. In terms of nothing wrong with social media, to an extent. If you are posting something meaningful, and the truth is, a lot of people these days, that's where they get their news, right? They're doing a scroll through, where can I find so hopefully we're scrolling through something to find something relevant, what's happening, what's popping. I'm looking at Linda's page to find out what do I need to be engaged, connected to. So when it comes to getting beyond Facebook, though, there's something, just about 2 points I want to make. Number one, we need to mind our own business. Listen to what I'm saying. Mind our own business. What I mean by mind our own business is be careful we're not scrolling through Facebook because I can check out what is the latest gossip, what's the latest fashion, what's the latest meme, who was the next fight that I can laugh at. That we have to be very careful that and I say mind our own business, that we as Muslims have some very specific business we need to be concerned with. There are some things we need to be actively involved and engaged with, and if it's because we're so busy with frivolousness and silliness that we're not minding our own business, right? So when there are events that we need to show up at, like the superintendent coming to Al-Hijrah on the 21st, right? We're scrolling through that because that is not that, that's not funny right now. I'm scrolling for something light, right? Something juicy. I'm looking for something juicy. So number one, you need to know what's your purpose. Why are you there? Why are you here? Why are you on Facebook? Why are you scrolling? What's your intention? How are you using your time? And the other thing is, we need to know, when I say specifically our own business, the way you get beyond Facebook is you have to know what's your purpose, what's your skill, what's your gift, what's your blueprint, what's in your DNA, right? What is it that you say, this is my skill, this is what Allah gave me. And when we're busy working that, when we're busy doing that skill, when we're busy giving back, our time for Facebook is really limited. If you've had a day in service and you're wore out, and so Facebook is your mindless scroll because your day is exhausted, well, alhamdulillah. If you're exhausted from serving people, you're exhausted from serving your family, you're exhausted from serving water, you're exhausted from standing with Coolmore, cleaning up their neighborhood, you're exhausted from standing at the airport, you're exhausted from the rally, you're exhausted from your humanitarian efforts, you're exhausted from teaching, whatever. If you're exhausted from khair, you get a pass. You get a pass. As long as you're not using it to undermine your own self, right? To undermine your own self. That's my point.
Okay.